So when I'm live. Okay. What are you thinking about this social distancing TV that we're doing right now? Have a word about it? Just received this morning, folks. This is our preparation for future TV live stuff with the interviews to make sure that we're socially distanced and following all the rules and regulations. So we got a directional boom mic, and we're on 2/7s. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to day 32 of Big J. But day 33, I do apologise. Wow, how can you lose count like that? Let me just write that down. Okay, so what have we got today? It's Sunday, and it is it's. Can you hear that? That's a prop. Yeah. It's definitely a prop. Is there anything above me you can see, Jilly? No? Definitely. Oh, bioflight. Interesting. See? Old, there we go. Anyway, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. I hope you enjoyed Toulouse yesterday. Of course, it was great fun. There's something else. That's a jet. What's... Oh, is he? What is it, a 320? Okay, okay. Because normally he would come out over this way, quite... Oh, okay, he's over Woking, right, okay, over Brooklands way. Yeah, so where are we today for our Sunday museum trip? We got just under 2 hours for this one, folks. If you remember, we visited Royal Air Force Museum Hendon in North London last year, or was it the year before? I'm not sure, whichever it was, but it was a fantastic historical place in itself. Gone through a lot of redevelopment around it with new flats and apartments. Even part of it, they had to move the original control tower to make way for the new developments, and of course the new developers gave them the money and covered the cost of moving the control tower and what was the Graham White workshops there, the original Graham White workshops. We're stepping back into time here, folks. London Airport, I mean, we're talking before London Airport was even thought about. We're talking about biplanes here. We're talking about the first ever Royal Air Service here. Back in the time of magnificent men in their flying machines, you know, literally right at the very, very beginning of flying, when they'd be hopping over to France, or you know, just when aircraft was starting to sort of, just single-seater aircraft were starting to fly out as far as sort of like northern France and places like that. So it was a really romantic time of aviation, it has to be said, before all the dodgy stuff started. So where we are here at Royal Air Force Museum London is actually an original Air Force base, basically, for, I think, the before the RAF, help me out here, before the RAF was the Royal I'm gonna have to look this up. I should know this off hand. It is the bear with me here, folks. It was a volunteer corps. A lot of people are answering me this right now. Okay, there we go. The RAF was founded on April the 1st, 1918, towards the end of the First World War, by merging the Royal Flying Corps, the RFC, there we go, the Royal Flying Corps, and the Royal Navy Air Service. So those two segments of our services joined together to become the Royal Air Force. And so the RFC, this is where the RFC were first conceived, and one of the first and only airfields in the UK as well, this one at Royal Air Force Hendon Museum. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going into, it's a massive museum, folks, and well, I wouldn't say massive, it's a great museum. Two separate sections. There's a section with the Hendon flying boat. Sorry, the Hendon flying boat, the flying boat. Over on the other side, in another purpose-built museum, all within the grounds. Sunderland flying boat, sorry, all within the same grounds. They've got some great displays over there, and a great restaurant as well. Over the other side is where we are, which is the original part of the museum. Some fantastic displays, all original aircraft as well, folks. And we're going to be in Bomber Hall, where where you have the Lancaster Bomber. And this particular Lanc hasn't been touched literally since it finished the war. It's a ton-up Lanc. She's done over 100 missions, and this particular aircraft, if you're a reader of any Bomber Command books, you will see this is where the famous caption by Goering is written on the side of the aircraft, basically saying that you will never reach the Ruhr, and we did, of course we did, with our big 4-engine Lancs and Halifaxes and Stirlings and the like. But this is a little walk round. There's the Vulcan in there as well, the B-17 Flying Fortress, the Halifax, the wreckage of the Halifax that we've talked about here before, along with other stuff there as well, artifacts and so on and so forth. So we'll have a little look around there, have a little chat, and I'll be in and out on the chat. Still working on that that edit, folks. It's nearly done. It is very, very close to completion. Got a couple of little tweaks to make on it, and then we'll be back with Just Jane from Lincolnshire. Is it York or Lincolnshire? Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Society up there in the north of England, and we'll be there after this. So enjoy this, and this is London RAF Museum Hendon. Enjoy it. Are we good? Right, hello and good morning everybody. Jerry Dyer with Big Jet TV here, live from the Royal Air Force Museum here at Hendon in London. Now, just to give you a little bit of information about Hendon, we'll come to the aircraft very shortly, but for those of you guys who may be interested in the history of Hendon, of course it was the original home of the pioneers of aviation. Back in 1908 it started out with one guy who built an aircraft and in his shed, literally, needed some ground to operate it from, and so became Hendon. And from that time right up till 1967, it was used for air races back in the 20s, and all those fabulous things, the wonderful men in their flying machines, so to speak. Since then, it was the first Royal Mail Delivery airport. It was an aerodrome. It was used in the RAF. So steeped in history, got a fantastic display of static aircraft here at Hendon, including the white hangars over the other side as well, and of course the original control tower is still here. It was put back together again a few years back. Hendon have done a tremendous amount of work here, bringing the museum right up to date. And of course you can read all about the information for Hendon Museum on their website, and of course don't forget guys, there's some great charities that they work with as well, so be appreciative if you could visit their website and have a look at what they're doing and everything about the history and some of the facts as well. So like I said, the museum houses a huge collection of static aircraft. Right behind me is the bomber hall, where we'll be having a walk around and looking at all the bombers that are in there. And the other side here, we have, of course, the fighters as well, the single-engine fighters, and a couple of twin engines as well, like the Canberra, jet fighters, and the Battle of Britain memorial flights as well. Today, like I said, I'll be showcasing the bomber hall here at London Hendon, and we'll be taking a close-up look at these amazing aircraft. And of course, this will be an introductory precursor to our all elite shows that we'll be bringing you, where we are planning to go on board these aircraft right up to date. Now this one here behind me, the Lancaster, we've got to be real careful if we ever were to go on board it, because it has health and safety issues on board it, so something that we're going to have to plan ahead. So again, before I start, just make sure that you visit the website at RAF Hendon. Just put into your browser Royal Air Force Museum London or Royal Air Force Museum Hendon, and make sure that you check out the charities that they work with and everything there. So here we go then. Let's get ourselves into Bomber Hall and check out some of these fantastic machines. And of course, what we'll be mainly looking at is the development of these aircraft, because don't forget, way back in 1945, when the war ended, but when the war started, and right back to the early part of World War I as well, don't forget, aviation only actually started in 1903. When I say started, the first man took flight in 1903. So, you know, we're only talking 40 odd years in the middle of the Second World War that that aviation had been running, or 30 years at the beginning of the wars. So let's get in there and have a look at some of these aircraft. Okay, bear with me. Okay, GP, I'm going to set everything up now. Okay. Still got picture, check picture, keep picture up. So, we are mobile. Okay, unhook. Go on there. We can lift this up. Okay, hold on a second. Stand by. I've got a bit of a problem with this lead. It needs to come the other side. Sorry about that. Okay, got a bit of a dodgy picture at the moment, obviously. It's okay, is it? Okay, just stand by. I'm just gonna leave this here like this. Yeah, sorry about that. I'm doing this one-handed at the moment. Just because. Okay. Sorry, just one more time for me. Thanks. you, sir. Okay. Okay, GP. I was under the impression that I had that. Mic's on. Mic's good. Okay, so here we go, folks. Sorry about that. Right. We are moving. Okay, so here's your Lancaster Bomber. We'll be coming to that in a short while. Before we come round to the Lanc, let's just have a little walk around the Bomber Hall. B-24 Liberator. Right there. She's a beauty. The Harvard, which was, I believe, one of the training aircraft mainly used. Oh, it's the Oxford, my apologies. Of course, the Blenheim, which was developed into a night fighter, short bomber, short-range bomber, Bristol Blenheim. Of course, they've got a. How's the audio, Gilly? Is it not too? It's not too in your face, so to speak, is it? Yeah, we got it. Okay, so they developed that into a night fighter later on in the war. A couple of big air-cooled engines. Bristol Mercuries. Obviously, some developers, aircraft manufacturers, favouring the air-cooled or water-cooled engines. So what we'll do is we'll move around here. Decent sized bomb bay. Not too easy to see inside the aircraft. Bomb aimer's sight right there. If we can get a good close up of that, or not really. Entered the war really early, around about actually, when I say entered the war, actually entered service in around about 1937. So one of the very early developed bombers, only twin engine bombers at this time, and then of course the Air Ministry calling on designers to develop long range bombers in the need for possibly increasing their range at a later date. So let's just, as we walk around here, they've moved, Hendon have moved a lot of their aircraft into this hall, and impressively, and one of these things that, if you look at, just have a look at scale here, look at the size of that Stuka dive bomber over there. These are all, these are not replicas, folks, these are actual aircraft. Heinkel HE-111, that was the only real heavy bomber that the Germans had, of course. Twin engined only. And these engines on the Heinkel, I seem to remember, are actually, as with a lot of the German aircraft, were actually upside down. They were inverted engines. See the air intakes? So Stuka, with its classic wing profile. And that noise that that they used to have when they were diving was actually apparently, I don't think it's a myth, but apparently they actually built something in to scare people with. bomb aimer's position right there. From memory, I think they just had one pilot on board the 111. There's his, you can just about see the stick there, the column. Just the one column. Big chunky wing. Look how deep that wing is. Obviously to store the fuel. Of course, belly, I'd imagine a belly gunner, whether that was radio controlled or not, I don't know. It's radio controlled, obviously very, very early development back in '39. Pretty primitive design, but effective. Mostly used, obviously, in the Battle of Britain. So, that's your German long-range bomber. Now, this one here, this is an interesting find, I should say. You can just about see, this is a Halifax bomber. It's a Mark II. You can just about see the TL markings on the side there. That signifies the squadron. This was 35 Squadron. And 35 Squadron was actually led by Leonard Cheshire, who was the was to become the leader of the Pathfinders. And then later on, of course, after unfortunately Guy Gibson losing his life on returning back in his Mosquito, Leonard Cheshire was to take over the Dambuster Squadron 617. Now this aircraft in particular, you can see obviously it is a wreck. This was literally pulled off the lake bed of a Norwegian lake after it was on a raid to the Tirpitz. Obviously the RAF carried out a number of raids on the Tirpitz to try and, whilst it was in a Norwegian field. No jokes, please. And of course, it landed, the pilot successfully landed it on a lake. It was shot, it was obviously hit by flak. And what is amazing is he managed to land it on the lake. But obviously, during the warmer months when the lake, when the ice dispersed, the aircraft sank to the bottom. And there it stayed right up until around about the 70s, I believe, somewhere then, where it was recovered and successfully recovered and brought here to Hendon. Now you can see here, this is the fuel tank area, the outboard fuel tanks, where the flak successfully hit the aircraft and burnt the wing. He obviously managed to bring the aircraft down, land it on the lake, but as you can see, caused a huge amount of damage. The wing obviously burnt off and dislodged itself, and that's the remnants of the wing right there. Let's just have a little look here. This is the kind of damage that you'd see inflicted on aircraft after a raid. These guys obviously very, very lucky indeed to get out. It's a 7-man crew there, fellas. That's probably the ground crew. Each aircraft assigned its own ground crew at the squadron base. You can see this Halifax bomber has successfully made it back to base. Looks like a Mark II there with the D fins on it. So, as you can see, there's a tremendous amount of damage caused by that flak. So as we come around the front end, now they've obviously we've lost the outboard engine, as you can see. Now this engine was actually from this aircraft, taken, the Merlin XX, taken and restored by a restoration group. What's interesting, as you can see here, the Air Ministry and different designers worked on a number of different ways to reduce the amount of flame that came out of the exhausts. And this is one of the way, the trumpet exhaust, which was created to minimize the amount of flame that came out so that the night fighters couldn't see it, as you can see there. A very sort of like minimal amount of exhaust flame coming out of the engine so that they weren't visible, of course. So beautifully restored, that Merlin XX. And as you can see, because of the exposure of the wings, we'll probably be able to see it better around the other side. But look at the all the engine controls for the carburation, adjustment controls, and obviously you can just about see. No, you can't see it. Unfortunately, I can't. Now, what is a shame, I might have to come back to this because they do have lighting on this aircraft. So we'll try and see if we can get the lights on in here, because that is a pretty impressive cockpit to look at when the lights are on. Handley Page Victor, as we all know. Handley Page building this Halifax. So you can see the front turret there, bomb aimer's position, right there. That's where the wireless operator would have sat, right in there. You can see how small. Yeah, we'll probably get quite a bad. We're at the worst side of the museum at the moment, Jelly, just for in terms of reception. Okay, so you can see the. This was before the aluminium props were brought into service. Wooden props originally on these Mark II Halifaxes. In fact, all the Halifaxes only having wooden props. These are the engines as they were brought off the lake. You can see a little bit clearer the exhaust. You see, he did a great job bringing this aircraft down. There's actually a crease in the fuselage there as well. Bakelite, that's the that's actually a very early turret up there as well, mid-upper gunner turret. And that's for the wireless. Early aircraft obviously had a line that ran right the way across from that position up to the tailplane. But these slightly later aircraft, this is sort of like between a Mark I and a Mark II. Oh, that's a nice noise. Okay, so that's actually as she was brought off the lake, folks. Really impressive, sort of like display of a wreck. And of course, as we all know, the history of the Tirpitz, eventually brought down by Cheshire and his crew with the Tallboy bomb, taking out the Tirpitz. So, moving on. The Liberator. Probably after the B-17, one of the finest and most successful four-engine heavy bombers of the US Air Force. Of course, used by the British as well. And of course, the Americans only doing the daytime raids, whereas the the British doing the night raids. It's one presented by the Indian Air Force to the RAF Museum. How about that? That's pretty impressive. I'd imagine air-cooled radials once again. Not the biggest of the American bombers were never known for their huge bomb carrying capacity. The Liberator having these side bomb stows, which as you can see there, where the side bomb doors would open and the bombs would drop from a vertical position. Side undercarriage folding up into the wing, as opposed to into its own bay underneath the engine nacelle. These are proper cannons up the front here. Americans, I think most of the American armory was cannon rather than the 22. You can see how small the cockpit is there, which is so visibility, I'd imagine, when taxiing was probably quite dodgy. Of course, what's interesting about this aircraft, as you can see, is she has a nose wheel, as opposed to most of the bombers of the era having a rear wheel. So she was a nose wheel steer. Decent enough wingspan. For anyone who likes their tractors, this is the sort of thing that you would see on the airfield, towing the bomb tally out to the aircraft. Lovely old thing, that. I guess there's a lot of people who watch Big Jet TV who say like their tractors. Nice bit of nose art there. Of course, nose art was one of the things that sort of like the squadrons worked on their individual aircraft. This is a very famous one. I'll just show you this quickly. That was a very famous one on a Halifax Friday the 13th. That actually made it through the war as well. And unfortunately, all that remains of that Halifax is literally the bomb tally and her nose art. You can just see there. That's the squadron medals, so to speak, that the pilot would have worn on his tunic. That's actually the window of the radio operator, believe it or not. So here we go then. Right, let's just move around here before we make our way up to the Vulcan. And back to the Halifax. Still got good feed there, Jilly. Okay. See what I'm going to do quick. That's it. There we go. Now, here we go. This is an interesting aircraft. Now, this was kind of the scourge of Bomber Command, and when you look at it in scale to the bombers, it's actually a significant aircraft. The BF-110, she's a night fighter, interceptor, and it wasn't until after the war that they actually found out that the reason why so many of the bombers were suddenly blown up without any notice at all, even though later on in the war they had what was called the AGL, which was the automatic gun laying turret on the Lancasters to detect aircraft, night fighters and night interceptors coming at them, so they'd at least get some warning. However, these particular aircraft, the 110, had what was called Schrag music, which is an upward firing cannon, and it's as simple as that. A really unfair way of taking them down, and of course all they do is they creep up underneath the bomb bay of a Lancaster, or creep up underneath a Lancaster. I'm not saying that all ME-110 pilots did it. Some of them were sympathetic to the bomber crews, because obviously they were all heroes in their own right, and some of these night fighter pilots would creep up and make sure that they were under the wing of the bomber, and shoot the wing out so that puncture the fuel tanks, and then at least give the crews some chance of escaping and parachuting to safety if they could. So, you know, some sympathetic night fighter pilots, others were less sympathetic. Of course, as you can see, she's quite a big aircraft, and this is a beautiful example, it has to be said. Like I said, scourge of bomber command, literally. And of course, that very similar model to the Ju-88 bomber with the Luftwaffe back in those days. So, just have a quick switch around here. Now, I know we're talking about bombers, folks, but this particular aircraft here, the Mustang, the P-51, beautiful aircraft, and a beautiful example of her here at London Hendon. And of course, later on in the war, Leonard Cheshire actually preferred, this was his preferred aircraft, as using it for pathfinding and actually marking the target for the bomber forces before they came in. So powered by, of course, the Rolls-Royce engine, very famous engine during the war. Now, just quick, let's just move around to this one here, which is again a big favourite amongst people. Just show this. This is a Merlin XX, powering most of the big aircraft back in the day. The Lancaster heavy 4-engine heavy bomber, of course the Halifaxes, and of course the Mustang, the Spitfire, and the Hurricane. And of course this one here as well, the Mosquito. Again, extremely lightweight aircraft, literally built out of wood. Can you believe it? So light, power to weight. It very easily repaired, of course, if they ever came back with damage. Guy Gibson used this aircraft later on in the war, and of course went missing on one of these Mosquitoes later on in the war, which was a great shame. Decent enough bomb load. They would sort of like an in-out bomber, where they would low altitude, high speed bombing runs, get in and get out. The size of these props, folks. Tiny little bomb aimer's position right down there. Of course, two-man crew on the Mosquito, and the flight flight engineer would also pair as the bomb aimer as well. As you can see, I don't know if you can see through there, but it's extremely tight in there to be able to squeeze down into the bomb aiming position, lie down, and release your bombs. Of course, some of them did it without the bomb aimer, and as we've seen in some of the movies, would literally use a bomb teat inside the captain's compartment. Such an impressive aircraft, and of course a great example of this aircraft right here at Hendon. Lovely little car, which a lot of flight crews used to buy whilst they were on station. Very cheap money, of course. Try and cram like seven of them all into one car and head down to the local pub, and of course drive back completely blitzed. Back in the day when the local cops would just be like, "Go on in, sonny, just get on your way there, sonny, make sure you're up in the morning," because literally every day was a miracle for these guys who flew in these aircraft, folks. Literally a miracle, making it through. They had, most of the bomber crews had to go through 30 operations, 30 night operations before being retired out of the Air Force. But then it would, a lot of them would return. We're coming back to this beautiful Lancaster in a short while. Let's just move round. Okay, here we go. Again, the Mosquito. Sorry, the Mustang. Huge, great air intake underneath her belly. Beautiful example, beautifully polished. And right behind her, as you can see, this is the Americans' 4-engine heavy, the B-17 Flying Fortress. Why did they call her the Flying Fortress? Nicknamed her the Flying Fortress, so to speak, because she was literally, she had an armory unlike any other aircraft. 2 waist gunners either side at the back, 10-man crew, 2 waist gunners. This one here would be operated, this gun turret here would be operated up front by this chap. There's the bomb aimer's position right there, Norton bomb sight. Again, not the biggest and heaviest load of bombs on board the aircraft, but they preferred to do things more in numbers than single aircraft. So they would fly in huge formations, mainly from Norfolk, the airfields in Norfolk, because it was so flat out there. Of course, our boys stationed in airfields up in Lincolnshire, but these boys would fly out of Norfolk and some down actually in the New Forest, a couple of stations down in the New Forest, but predominantly she was these aircraft, just walking up here, excuse me, predominantly these aircraft were stationed out in Norfolk. Big set of all air-cooled radials on her as well. So you've got a mid-upper turret. I say mid-upper turret, an upper turret. There's your waist gunner position out the back there. And of course a tail gunner as well. Later on, the tail gunner would become a radio-controlled or automated gun turret. These things, if you read the books and look at the pictures, these things would come back very resilient, half the tail missing, shot up, hundreds of holes from cannon fire. Such an impressive aircraft. And of course, many of them still surviving, America taking them back, and there are a lot of them still sitting out there in the desert, and a lot of them still being restored and flown, and you can fly these in America, fly on board these in America. There's quite a few historians who've restored them and of course brought them back to life as they were back in the day. And of course we do see one of these flying in the air displays in the UK. And that's the Memphis Belle, of course, the very famous Memphis Belle. And that one, the Memphis Belle, was painted, whereas this one would have been just in her bare metal. You see these panels here at the side, just quite interesting to see, and I'll show you on the Lancaster in a little while, that these panels, some of these panels are literally patches that they used to rivet. So sometimes when you can see on these aircraft, you see little patches where it's sort of like, are they supposed to be there? Well, they were sometimes literally created and patched over. So whether these are patches, I'm not sure. We'll just have a little check round the other side and see whether it's the same on the other side. This is the kind of thing that the geeks amongst us like to look at. So let's see if she's got patches on the other side. She does, so therefore they are not patches, they were during manufacture. So, even so, impressive to see. Very tight compartments, and of course, the most unfortunate thing with these aircraft when they were shot at, and if they went out of control, was the G-forces inside the aircraft. Very difficult for the crews to get out and bail out. Of course, it was always the pilot who would be last or tried to be last to leave his ship, but it was the ball gunner who sometimes was. There you go, the ball gunner right there. Now, these poor guys, if the hydraulics ever got shot out, and because the only way into the ball turret was through the inside of the aircraft, sometimes these guys would get trapped in the ball turret, and of course the rest is history really. I don't want to go into detail, but these poor guys, heroes every single one of them, wouldn't make it when the aircraft obviously either panned. If they panned with no hydraulics, so no undercarriage, they'd have to come down and belly land it. Just a little look over there. Okay, we got glitching, or okay. Okay, so we have. If I just keep me posted, Jilly. Okay, so the FW-190, the Focke-Wulf 190. Another, they used to have, they did have a long-nosed Dora, as they were called, later on in the war. And the FW-190, again, an amazing fighter, which was again the scourge of the Americans and the British as well. And of course, these guys, the Americans, you know, what would you prefer? Would you prefer to go in the daylight in huge formations with fighter escort? Of course, the fighter escort would be the those particular Mosquitoes, and yeah, I mean, during the daylight you can see what's going on. You can see your mates getting shot down. At night, you know, you just see explosions, whether they're decoys or what, you don't know. But it's a bit of a difficult one, tossing up whether you're going to go daylight or nighttime. Okay, Gilly, I'm just making my way around here to the B-25 Mitchell bomber, folks. This is the. Is it okay? So sorry about any glitching, folks, but we're right round the other side of the museum. So, okay, B-25 Mitchell bomber, another set of radials, and of course nose steering on this aircraft. Medium range bomber with the American Air Force, and of course used by the British as well later on in the war. This is the sort of bomb that you could expect it to be carrying. 2,000-pound high capacity bomb. Not the biggest of bomb bays, as you can see there, folks. Okay, now what I'm going to try and do here is make my way around. I just won't walk too fast, GP. Waist gunners on the Mitchell. And again, another rear turret, rear gunner who would sit up in there and use the guns almost with a yoke, almost like flying an aircraft. So have gun sights and everything there. Let's just have another little look round at the B-17, the Flying Fortress. This is a G, I believe. This is a G model. Little crew door there, which we've I don't know if how many of you guys have read many of the books on Bomber Command and the bomber forces during the war, but some fascinating stuff, and really gives you a perspective on how brave these guys were. Nice little bit of some of the what is amazing when you look at some of the materials that they used early on in the war. Bakelite, of course, was heavily used at this stage, but some of these titanium, early forms of titanium, but heat-resistant materials was what they were, obviously, what was most crucial. as you can see, what's interesting here is you don't have any exhaust outlets. There are your exhausts going right the way down to the outlets down there. So again, reducing the visibility of the aircraft in terms of night fighters. But of course, these aircraft not flying at night, only flying during the day. Carb air intakes, of course, I think. Still got good, you're still good. Okay, folks, well, here we are, look at this. Okay, so now this particular Lancaster Bomber served with 467 Squadron and later with 83 Squadron. She's actually got the 83 Squadron PO on her at the moment, and this particular model and particular aircraft was the first ever to carry out 100 nighttime missions. And as we've seen with the other aircraft, the other bombers, like the B-24 and even the Halifax. The Halifax had a decent bomb bay, but the B-17 had a very small bomb load. That's why they needed to fly them in such huge formations. But you can quite clearly see here how big the bomb bay is and how significant she was as an aircraft. And later on, when she was serving with 83 Squadron, this was put on the side of the aircraft. This is your pretty standard bomb tally. Look at that for a bomb tally. There's your 100 missions, DFCs and bars and so on and so forth. Again, on the tunics of the flight crew, of the captain, the skipper, as he was known. No enemy plane will fly over the Reich territory. That's what Hermann Goering actually said, the leader of the Luftwaffe at the time. And of course, we soon proved that wrong. Interestingly enough, you see those little alloy they're actually wire cutters for balloons, for if they fly through balloon. So that's always quite interesting. Of course, once again, tiny little cockpit. Bolton and Paul, I believe, front turret. Bomb aimer's position up the front. Now, don't forget, folks, that the plan is that we'll be going on board these aircraft in future shows with our elite members and bringing you some quite significant and interesting tours on board. Of course, powered by the Merlin XX. I would say the most successful engine in history in terms of prop-driven aircraft. Probably one of the most successful and one of the most preferred by aircraft designers. And what's interesting about this as well is that this undercarriage, and quite a few of you might, historians might know that these particular tyres, they didn't actually have treaded tyres back in the war. These would have been put on later on with tread on them. But this undercarriage is actually manufactured, I believe, by Doughty, and Doughty are still extremely active in the aviation industry. And I think you'll even see them on some of the most modern aircraft that we've got out there, which is really impressive to see. And of course, Doughty also doing the electrics. Now, this is another. Is it Doughty? Now I'm questioning myself. Okay, I'll have to come back on that one. But what's interesting is you can see the way they've covered the exhaust outlets on these earlier aircraft. The early versions of these were actually made of a of material. These are steel. You can just about see. You can just about see the stub, the exhaust stub behind there. Now that was that's obviously to stop the engine, the flame from the exhaust being seen by the enemy night fighters. And of course, the names on the front of these engines and on the carburetor, on the oil cooler intakes, I believe, are of course the Flying Officer McManus DFC, Distinguished Flying Cross, Pilot Officer Tottenham DFC. So a lot of these guys receiving the DFC either during or after the war. So you can see flaps. This is flap down position here. That's where the huge, great big housing bay for the undercarriage at the back. What's interesting as we come back here is the that bulge there underneath the aircraft. That's the H2s Dome, which is a very early form of radar, ground radar, which the navigators obviously used for pinpointing any positions. Mid-upper gunner with a okay, interesting. So you can just about see this is a cookie, what they called a cookie. Huge, great bombs that they drop. And of course, this aircraft being famous for the dams raids, they were heavily modified. Literally took out the bomb bay doors and panelled it and reduced the weight. Took out the mid-upper gunner. I think they even took the rear gunner position out, just to, because these turrets actually weighed a ton, well, more than a ton, but weighed a lot. That entire assembly would probably reach all the way down to the bottom of the S. The whole assembly of it, obviously, it moved in a on its own axis. Huge, great big rudders. That's the max out. That's to stop the rudder from overcompensating. Inspection panels, trim rudder, and that's just obviously the overcompensate there as well. Bolton and Paul Mark II with the 2.2s. Later on in the war, these the Lancs would be fitted out with the cannon, 50 caliber cannon. You can see how small that tiny little position is there. One of the loneliest positions on a bomber, apparently, the rear gunner. The amount of times that the communications would go down and he'd be on his own with no comms with the guys up front. They're the chutes for the cartridges, for the empty cartridges. And of course, I might be getting some of my facts wrong, folks, so I do apologise for that. And I always love to hear me being corrected. Again, these are the trims, the elevators, max out trims tabs. Just have another good look at her. Such an impressive aircraft. I mean, she's up, fair enough, she's up on her rear wheels being jacked up, so you don't get the sort of like angle, the true angle of her when she's when she's sitting on the ground. But I think that's good enough. I think we've got enough there, of course. Okay, I think we can now move round to our final. Is that the Juno engine? I wonder if that's the Juno. No, it's Daimler. Daimler-Benz, wow, look at that. Be the oil sump down there, but she's an inverted. Exactly what the benefits were of inverting an engine, I'm not sure. I'd be very hear about that. If you're watching this in, you're watching this on. We got what? What have we got? Is it? Okay, so we're going to be massively out of sync. Okay, okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Oh, that's... So people are still waiting. They're expecting it to be. So what? Okay. Okay, just stand by. Billy? Are you running? We're back on, are we? Okay, fantastic, fantastic. Okay.
I'll leave you to it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
Cheers.
good stuff.
Thank you. Okay, just standing by. I'm just trying to establish. Okay. Right. Okay. I'm just checking to see whether. Oh, I think it was a Doughty main gear on the Lancaster. Right, okay, here we go, folks. We're back on again. Apologies for that. We are inside a museum, and in a sort of like right at the back of the museum as well. So it's obviously difficult for us to. Are you good, Gilly? Okay, so here we are at the final part of our little tour around Hendon, and there is XL318. There are a number of Vulcan bombers that are on static display throughout the UK, and of course we are all aware of the beautiful aircraft that we used to see flying in the displays throughout the UK, which is no longer, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll be doing something with that aircraft in a future show, and getting a taxi run with her, and possibly doing something with the Nimrod as well. I believe the one at Southend also does taxi runs. Unfortunately, these guys are a little bit difficult to get hold of, but that's something that we're continually striving on. Now, one of the most important, not important, but one of the most interesting things that you notice, and probably only notice it when you actually come to be when it gets pointed out, is, and I'm not sure if it's actually as noticeable on film as it is standing here, but when you look at the sheer size of this aircraft, and then you look down at the undercarriage, and you see that these wheels are literally not much larger than your average family saloon car wheel. Okay, there's 8 of them on there, but again, it just surprises me how the braking was affected. Of course, these aircraft did have chutes on them, so that would go a long way to helping them, and of course the air brakes. Such a tall undercarriage, but such an interesting setup. We still got a good shot? Still got a good picture? Okay, great thing is that this aircraft is still kind of as she was when she was taken out of service. Dirty and covered in grime. Look at the size of this beautiful wing. So impressive. Such an impressive design, and of course the aircraft was originally conceived and developed way not long. I think it was swept wing design was looked at by Barnes Wallis, and of course this is the Avro Vulcan, and therefore Avro working on that technology, probably very close to the end of the Second World War. Not sure exactly when it first went into development, but I'm sure it was in the late 50s, somewhere around about then. Of course, extremely impressive bomb load on these things, and of course they were developed to carry
strategic bombs. Look at the size of this bomb bay, folks. I mean, that is just massive. You could fit a couple of decent sized family carriers in there, that's for sure. So they knew what they were developing it for. Of course, the for Rolls-Royce, I think it was the Spey, or was it the Snemca engine that powered this? Same one as Concorde. Look at some of these ordnance. Let's just double check this is powered up. Okay, we're good. So this actual aircraft was purchased in 1966, believe it or not. So let's just take a look at her front end. Again, another extremely tight cockpit. That's the refueling nozzle at the front there, I believe. She actually went through refueling when they flew to the Falklands, obviously. At least 2, maybe even 3 refueling sorties. That's the crew access doors, and these guys at Hendon actually do tours of this aircraft, and you can check out details of that on their website. So just have a look and check out this this is the bomb tally. This is what you're looking at in terms of the capabilities, its carrying capacity. There's your gun sight. You still good, GP? Okay, because we're right. Okay, you're getting tearing or what? More than likely, I would have thought. Okay, so the chances are... So I will have to walk back through. Of course, fortunately enough, apart from the Falklands War, to bomb one runway, this aircraft was never used in combat, which is good news for us, of course. Again, there you go. You can see the size of that undercarriage. Obviously, served its purpose, did exactly what it was needed to do. The smaller the wheels, the smaller the tyres, the less weight, of course. They could have obviously experimented and opted with 4 huge tyres as opposed to... in fact, to be honest with you, looking at it now, it almost seems as though, because these are actually... it looks like that's one big hub assembly with 2 tyres on it, as opposed to one single tyre. So obviously rolling resistance, and it was just preferred. It was just a preferred design to do it that way, to go about it that way. But still, extremely impressive. Like I say, you can get a tour around this particular aircraft with the Hendon Museum, selling tickets. I believe they're sold out for the next couple of months at least. Get a tour around the aircraft, on board it, and get a real good close-up look inside it. So this, I believe, is one of the particular... I'm not sure. Would have this been carried by the Vulcan? I'm not 100% sure. This is the blue steel. So it's air to surface. Okay, so. Okay, we're just making our way back around now, GP. Back to the Mozzie. The wooden plane. Got one of these in New Zealand flying at the moment, I believe. Lost a couple over the years. Used to have a fantastic one flying in the UK air displays. I think she was lost, unfortunately, with her pilot as well. Didn't make it out of a dive. But they do have one in New Zealand now flying, I believe. Let's just get some nice perspective shots for you guys. Unfortunately, I can't stand at the front of the Vulcan and get a good perspective shot, but I hope that's a good one for you. Just goes to show the size of the hangar and the commitment these guys here have got at Hendon Museum in London. There's another back shot of that ME-110. Upward firing cannon, as you can see, as I described earlier on. And like I said, later on in the war, Lancasters were equipped with only a few of the squadrons, I have to say. The first.
Yeah, good, go. Check audio. Here she comes. Here she comes.
Called it the Flying Porcupine, I believe, because it had so much armament on it. Okay, another good shot now. I seem to recall looking on here, there were a couple of patches on her quite some time back. She's a beautiful aircraft. Let's just get another shot of her from back here. Fired up those lights yet? No, they haven't. That's a bit of a shame, to be honest. I'd like to have. Let me see if I can. Whilst, are you still good, Gilly? Let's just see if I can. Whilst I'm walking around here, let's go and have a little look at this, because this is quite an interesting. Quite interesting, folks. Just tighten that up a little bit. So this is the. Some of the bomber bases themselves. This was Bomber Command's operational availability wall, and you can see just how many airfields there were. There's one in particular that I've been to: Elvington, Full Sutton, Holmon, Spalding Moor, Leconfield, Lisset, Melbourne, Pocklington. Wow. Aylsham Wolds, Binbrook, Fiskerton, Hemswell, Kermington, Ludford Magna, all of these airfields, and of course Scampton there. very famously known for 617 Squadron. But Barney, Coningsby, East Kirkby, Fullbeck, of course East Kirkby, very famous as well. Coningsby and Scampton, both 617 Squadron. Spilsby, Struby, Waddington, Woodall Spa, Middleton St George, Linton and Linton on Ouse. Just some crazy names, that some very famous names. This is from April 26th, 1945. See how many aircraft are on charge, available, what aircraft they are, which squadron they are, and of course 625 and 153 operating out of Scampton at on this particular date, because they disbanded 617 Squadron later on in the war after the Dams raids, but 61 Squadron were used for the Tirpitz raids as well, but then later disbanded and brought back again with the RAF recently. So some real interesting information there on that board. And here we have, which is interesting, this is what brought down the Tirpitz, or actually sank the Tirpitz. This is the Grand Slam bomb. Huge, great piece of ordnance, believe it or not, slung underneath the belly of a Lancaster. Just one bomb per aircraft, and literally an earthquake-style bomb. Penetrate the earth and then go off and actually activate once it's inside the target, so to speak. Okay, let's just have a little look, because I did want to show you guys, because I actually I don't want to waffle on too much about it, but I did actually I was actually on the recovery, spent best part of 4 years with my sister down at the woods, not literally lived there, but during the summer months going there and digging up a Halifax bomber, and all parts of it, which I have in my house right now, all with the permission, of course, of the landowner. And I just wanted to give you an example of some of the stuff that I managed to find. Let's just have a quick look. Excuse me, guys.
Yes.
Are the lights inside the Halifax operational or not? No? Oh, that's a shame. Okay. All right, no problems. Okay, so there you go. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see inside this Halifax, because they do light her up. So if you ever come to Hendon Museum, they do light her up, and you can have a look inside there. And it's great to see. So before we finish, I think what would be nice for you guys, because you've been so patient, would perhaps be for me to have a little look and a wander around the other hall, which is let's just have a little look here. Let's have a look at some fighters, shall we? Okay. We've been very privileged to get in here, and a big thanks goes out to Chris from the press department, who's allowed us to, of course, film in here before the gates open to the public. This is their. Are you good, Jilly? Okay. This is their Battle of Britain display here, of course. Very famous Spitfire, Hurricane, and the enemy aircraft. Messerschmitt Bf 109. Again, with the upturned engine. Interesting. And of course, our Spitfire, powered by the Merlin. Different types of exhaust stubs were played and toyed with during the development of the war, and I'm not sure how many marks of the Spitfire there were, but I know there were a significant number. So who likes their helicopters? Got a great display of helicopters as well, right here at Hendon. Remember these when I was a kid. let's move round to the Jaguar. Look at that. Still operational. Only just, but still operational. That's a Tornado, my apologies. Got it wrong again, Dad. Quite similar in look, so my apologies for all you jet fighter knowledgeable individuals who just basically slammed me for calling that the Jaguar. But there we go, my apologies. Look at those elevators in that down position. Pretty impressive, huh? Swept wing design. Wings are obviously in their swept position. You can see where the where they actually swivel. Look at that. That's quite impressive. Something you don't often get to see. Just get up underneath there for you. Look at that, where the actual wing pivots. That's crazy, man. That's insane. It's quite impressive, really, to see where that. Never seen that before. Okay, let's. Here's one of my favourite aircraft from flying displays when I was a kid. And just look at the. This is obviously a carrier-based aircraft with the wingtip, which we're going to see, believe it or not, on a commercial Boeing 777X in the next year. We're going to see it actually rolling out quite soon, and probably much the same design and development of catching and locking mechanisms that you see right there, which is crazy to think, still using that technology. But really, there are only a certain number of ways that you can use to lock up something like that. Okay, I'll tell you what we can do, possibly. Okay, we are definitely going to go, Jilly. Okay, because I can hear kids. I can hear kids. Yes, okay. Chop wing Spitfire, quickly. Canberra over there. Meteor, Vampire, Tempest, all sorts of aircraft. And the kids are coming. Okay, guys, let me just see if I can. I'm probably going to be massively out of sync here, but just stand by. Okay, let me just check. Just hold on. Yeah. Let's have a look. Oh. That's a shame. Okay. Just hold on.
You managed to finish before all the noisy.
Yeah, we just about made it. I think we just about made it.
Yeah, I shall look back at the highlights later on.
Yes, thank you.
You enjoyed it though?
Yes, very much so. I hope the audience did as well. Just,
yeah, it's good stuff.
yeah, it's a great museum.
You
guys have done a great job.
I finished full-time work at Heathrow after about 40 years,
Oh, wow.
a couple of years ago, and I came along here and volunteered 1 day a week and
Oh, that's fantastic.
take people in the cockpit of the Vulcan and
Yeah, that's
Phantom,
what's,
things like
that's
that.
what
You
we
know.
want to do on here.
Yeah.
One day soon.
Yeah, it's health and safety, but if you
Yeah,
you get it fixed up with the guys there, I'd be happy to show you around.
great stuff.
It's an experience, and we've got lots of stories to tell about the Falklands and the Cold War.
Yeah, for sure. We'll definitely be doing that.
Yeah.
Okay, so there you go, folks. Thank you very much indeed for tuning in. Am I in tune? Am I in sync, Jilly? Okay, there we go. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it. Little bit Heath Robinson, sort of like picking my way through history as best I could, giving you guys some information that you probably already know, but for those who don't know, I'm glad I could be of service, and I hope you enjoyed it. And of course, don't forget Hendon Museum, the Royal Air Force Museum at London, is where you want to go into your browser to check any information. It's free to enter. There is no charge. Of course, there is a parking lot here. You do have to pay, but it's very reasonable. And I just have to say, they've got great markings. The way they've redone the parking lot here, the parking lot markings are very much like taxiways. And someone with a lot of forethought has gone into doing that, which is quite good fun for the kids like me. But anyway, listen guys, thank you so much once again for tuning in. We are on Wednesday. Saturday, you've got Manchester this Saturday. That is the plan. And I'm going to be doing some hedge trimming on Friday with a new hedge trimmer that I received the last couple of days, and making that view from the runway a lot better for the audience, always working for you guys. All elite members, thank you so much once again, and welcome to all new elite members. I know we've had a couple of you guys sign up in the last couple of days, and even this morning to watch the show. Thank you very much indeed. Like I said, we are going to be coming back to RAF Hendon, and we're going to be going on board some of the aircraft to look at the cockpit layout and get some more close-up stuff as well as going around all these fighter jets as well. So once again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you on Saturday on Big Jet TV. Thanks very much indeed. See you later. Bye-bye.
It does, doesn't it? Okay. Hey folks, how about that? Just check your audio, Julie, just double check, because new mic.
Clean up in aisle 4, please. Clean up in aisle 4, please.
I want to hear that back. Okay, I didn't hear it back. Wow, what a show. I have to be honest with you, when I saw that back, a lot of these shows, when I watched them back, it's fantastic because it brings back great memories, because obviously the intensity of everything that we do with the show and everything, when I get back I'm kind of tired, you know, and I need to break everything down, put everything on charge, by which time I just never get to watch the shows, and now to be able to watch them back, fantastic. Just a quick one about my shirt, folks. I had a dream last night. I'm a very good dreamer, and I had a dream last night, and I was watching TV, and there was somebody who was in the background, and he was wearing this shirt. That was just in my dream. That's all I remember. Anyway, but great chat, I have to say. A lot of people really enjoying that from the museum at RAF Hendon. So we've got more to bring you, folks, especially Lancaster Bomber related. We're going to be at Lincolnshire Aviation Heritage Centre for this afternoon show. We need about, what have we got, Gilly? Half an hour to an hour to load up. Okay, 2:30, folks. We're just working on a little bit of a logo as well. So we're swapping the logo out. So around about 2:30, we will be back with some great stuff from Just Jane at Lincolnshire, in Lincolnshire. So listen, a lot of people learning a lot of stuff, and a lot of people getting involved there. I really enjoyed it. We'll be back in around about half an hour. Don't go away.